Good morning. Welcome to Mitchell Consulting's series on training. Today in SAP Business 1, we're going to be talking about the payment process. Today in the payment process, we're going to discuss the incoming payments, the outgoing payments, and the payment wizard. So a little bit before we start, a little bit about SAP, some terminology that we're going to discuss. We're going to go into banking. In SAP banking, we have what's known as incoming payments. These are money coming in from customers or vendors, money that's brought in. Typically, we refer to this as cash receipts. We also then, when the money comes in, we're going to go through the concept of making the deposit, take the money, and actually put it into the bank. Then we're going to discuss the outgoing payments. And we normally refer to this as a lot of people call it AP checks or the check run. And then we're going to talk about the payment wizard. All right? So before we start, let's talk a little bit about terminology. I'm going to open up the business partners. And I'm going to go to the business partner master, and I'm going to call up a customer. Again, you can see here under the payment terms, right, we have in the banking, we have what's known as the business partner bank. All right, this is used when we're dealing with wire transfers or electronic payments. This is the bank that the customer uses. So if we're going to do some incoming or outgoing transfers, we'll go to the bank. The payment runs, here we have a default what's known as house bank. This is the bank that in SAP Business 1 I am using for my internal use. And then we have the payment methods. Okay, so you can see different payment methods. Each payment method can be linked to a specific bank. So we can have multiple banks. And we can limit what business partners, what customers or vendors can be used on certain banks. So we see here for Earthshaker Corporation, we can get incoming bank transfers from Bank of America. If we click on the payment methods, we can see the definition in here. All right? We determine payment methods for both incoming and outgoing payments. We have payment methods for checks and for transfers. So in this case, we have an incoming bank transfer. So you can see the house bank, which we're using, Bank of America, and we can see the file that's going to be created. We'll discuss this further in the payment wizard. So now let's go to a vendor. And we can see the same type of concept. Okay, we have the business partner bank for the vendor. So if we're going to send electronic payments, ACH, we can send it to this bank. We also have our house bank and our corresponding bank runs. So you can see here we have a variety of outgoing methods. We have outgoing checks. You can see here defined as the payment type outgoing, the payment means checks, and the corresponding bank. This will be used to generate a check file, and then in return, we will print checks, which is kind of the standard way most people actually do the payment run, which they refer to as the check run. We can also see we have the same thing with the transfers. So if we open up here, we can see we have the payment method. Again, it's an outgoing method. It's tied to a bank transfer. This is the bank, and this is the file format. So we want to send electronic files to the bank. They can be received like an ACH payment. Okay, so let's go in now to SAP and let's look at the screens. We're going to talk about an incoming payment. Now, I'm going to discuss a lot of stuff in the incoming payment, which also is going to relate to the outgoing payments. You can see by opening these two screens, they are similar in nature. You can see the outgoing payments here and the incoming payments. Same type of look. Okay, so let's start with the incoming payments. And again, like we discussed, we can do incoming and outgoing payments to both customers, vendors, and directly to a GL account. This is a nice feature in SAP because a lot of times you'll get maybe you'll have to send a refund check to a customer, and in typical software, you'd have to define that customer as a vendor, then you'd have to go through the concept of creating an invoice to the vendor and so on. We can easily do it right here to the vendor and to the GL account. So let's talk first about the customer. let's select our customer. I'm going to pick here. Down here we see the outstanding invoices. Right? So let's scroll down here to the bottom. Get a couple here. So you can see a couple things here. Now, as we know with SAP, we can modify this screen by going into the form settings, and we have the ability of selecting several other different types that we may need. Okay? For the purpose of the training class, I put the ones that I'm going to be currently using and show you, which is the information here. Okay? So you can see here is I can select a specific invoice. So let's select this invoice here. We can see that the invoice is for $327. If we want to drill into the invoice, we can click on the document. Okay, we can see the actual invoice. Okay, we can see the balance due $327. Let's start with a simple one. Let's just say we're going to pay that invoice. So we're going to pay this invoice, so we're going to select it, and we're going to pay that invoice. We're going to pay the invoices in full. So we've selected our invoices we want to pay, and now we have to determine how we're going to pay it. In SAP Business One, we can pay with cash, with a check, with a credit card, or the bank transfer. So I can right-click on the form, and I go to my payment means. It's also accessible up here, so we can do it right from the form. Right? And again, a lot of the stuff I'm showing you is going to be related to the outgoing payments too, the same principle. So if we want, we can select a check. All right, we can select our bank. In this case, we're going to put the amount. So we can see we're paying the $4,005.75. I can right-click, copy balance due, click OK, and click Add. Good. Let's go back and see what we did. That was a simple one, and we'll get a little more complicated as we go through. So you can see here that we've selected these two payments. We paid them in full. We can always right-click, go to the payment means, and we can see how we paid it. Okay? And it's going into a clearing account. This clearing account is nice for the deposit feature, which I'm going to show you after the incoming payments. What we're doing, since SAP Business One is real time, what we're doing is we're taking the money into a deposit account or a clearing account, because we've taken that money from the customer right now. So in real time, we're affecting Earthshaker's credit limits and how much they owe and so on, but we haven't put that money in the bank. So that money's not available for us to really make any payments. So it's sitting in a clearing account. And then in the deposit section after this, we'll go in and we'll take it out of the clearing account and we'll actually deposit it into the bank. Okay, so let's show you another feature. So let's actually go here. Let's add another one. I'm going to call up Earthshaker. Take this one here. Okay. So now we can see we have an amount here. What we could do is we have a cash discount percentage and a total discount. Now, if this customer's terms were, say, 2% net 10, and the 2% net 10 fell within the time frame I'm paying, which is May 17th, the amount would come up automatically. But if I want, I can go ahead and give this person a 2% discount. Okay, so we're going to take 2%, which is $190.75, or I can just go in and say, you know what, I want to just make this a nice even 200. A nice even $200. So he's actually getting a 2.9% discount. So the total payment is going to be this amount. So we'll see the effect on General Ledger when we do that. So again, we can right-click, go to our payment means. If we want to do a bank transfer, we can do a bank transfer. We can select our GL account. This one here. Okay, we can go ahead and put a reference date and a reference amount. We can use credit cards. Now you see this MasterCard came up automatically because within the business partner, I have a default for a credit card. So here I've defaulted this credit card. So the customer always going to use their credit card. You can actually set that up as a default. Go back to the payment means. Okay, or you can just do simply cash. So in this case, and let's actually split this. Let's say for some reason we're going to actually write a check, and we're going to do a check for $5,000. Okay, and then we're going to go to bank transfer, because I can make a split, and I'm going to go to the bank transfer. I'm going to put today's date, reference number, and I'm going to go ahead and put the difference of 4337.5. Okay, again, you can see that. Another simple one, let's just add this. Let's call it back up. And again, you can see the invoice we paid, the amount we paid. If we right-click, go to the payment means, you can see the two that we've used. Notice the credit card and cash are grayed out. I didn't use that, but you can see I did a check for $5,000, and I did a bank transfer for the remaining amount. Okay? So now, that's kind of simple, but let's do a partial pay. We can also do some other stuff here. We can do partial pays, and we can do payments on account. Let's go back in. Let's select our customer. All right, so let's go this one here, but now we want to select it, but we don't want to give a discount, but we only want to give them a payment of $5,000. Okay, so we're going to right-click, go to our payment means, do a check. Let's right-click, copy balance due. Here I would actually put the check number that I got from the client. So they gave me a partial payment on this one. We're going to click OK. We're going to add it. Let's go back. And you can see here we did a payment of $5,000, and we can see a balance due. If we open up the document, okay, again, we can see the amount applied. We have a $5,000 payment, and we have a balance due for the $375.07. Again, if we right-click, look at the payment means, we can see the amount paid. Okay. We can also go here and access the journal if we want to see the effect within the general ledger. So you can see that what's happening is I'm debiting the clearing account, and I'm affecting the customer in real time. So let's open up another one. Now, another thing that happens a lot is, let's say we have a customer, and the customer is going to give us a check, and he just wants us to apply it to the oldest invoices. So you can see here we have some invoices here. So let's say he gives us an $8,000 check. So now what we can do is we can go in and we can right-click. We can go to the payment means first, and we're going to put in our $8,000 check. Okay. Then we can go and add in sequence. If I click this, you'll see what happens. What the system does, it gets the oldest invoice first. It does take into consideration credit memo. So if there was a credit memo, it would take the credit memo first, and then it would go in and select. So you can see it paid these invoices in full. Okay, and this last invoice, which is for $1,478.32, it paid $301. And you can see I have the 8,000. So let's add this. You could also look at the journal remark before we do it. This is a new feature in the 8.82 version of SAP for those of you who used SAP Business One before. So now I can actually preview my journal before I add. So it's going to show me what's going on within the journal remark before I actually add it. Okay, so let's add. And again, let's call it back up. And you can see the same principle. You can see the actual journal that was created in real time, the effective general ledger. And if you right-click and look at the payment means, you can see it here. Okay. One last thing we'll do, let's do an on account. Let's say that the customer is paying you, and he sent you a check for 2 invoices, but the one invoice has already been paid. For some reason, he double paid it or so on. So we're paying this one, but let's say he gave you a check for $2,000. So we're going to select the one. We're going to right-click, go to the payment means, and we're going to type in $2,000. See, I got to go here. Okay, because we need to select the on account. So I'm going to put the rest on account. So we're going to apply this amount, and we're going to create the rest on account. So we can click OK. All right, we can go in, we can add it, and you can see the amount of the transaction, and we want to make it on account. So if we go back and look, you can see that it was an on-account payment. Okay, now let me show you something else here. We can go in and we can look at payments to vendors. This works in the same way, except what we're doing is we're taking an incoming payment from a vendor. So in this case, when I tab, I'm getting a list of vendors, not customers. So I can go to a specific customer, or excuse me, vendor, in the same principle. I can go here, and I can select an incoming, an outgoing to a payment, and we could do it to the vendors directly. I also have the ability of doing an account. This is a nice feature because sometimes you may get a check that's not really related to a customer or a vendor, or you don't want to relate it to a customer or vendor. Maybe it's a loan from something, and you want to affect the GL account directly. So what you can do is you can bypass this, and you can go and select the GL account. So see if we can take, put it here, and we can go ahead and put the amount. Same principle. We can right-click. We can select our payment means. We can copy the balance due. We can click OK, and we can add it. Okay, we go back and look, and we can see here that it's an on-account. It's a payment going directly to a GL account. There's no customer or vendor involved, and we can see the payment means. And again, if we look at the journal transaction, you can see the same thing. We've gone to the check clearing account. So what we've done with incoming payments, it's nice in SAP Business One, we can do the incoming payments, which to both customers, vendors, and GL accounts. So now we've done those payments. We've affected the client in real time, but remember, we've gone to a clearing account. So the money's in there, and we have to create a deposit. We can run a check register. Again, if we want to see what we've done, let's run a check register for today. All right. And you can see the register, and you can see the payments that I've entered today. All right. When you're dealing with credit card, there's also a credit card management, so you can go here, and we can manage credit cards. Okay. Okay. And again, we can see our credit cards. We can select a specific credit card. Okay. We can go look at the currency. We can, again, manage the type of credit card. We can make changes. We can see that this credit card was linked to a deposit number 11, so we can click and open up our deposit. So we have the ability of actually managing the credit cards and endorsing the credit cards through here. Okay. So that was the incoming payments. So as we talked about, those incoming payments now went to a clearing account. So now we're going to make our deposit. So we come in maybe the next day, and we're going to go here to our deposits. And now we're going to move the money from the clearing accounts directly into a specific bank account. So you can see the checks that we have here. We can look at credit cards, and the cash is just a lump sum of cash. We can see the cash on here. The cash is not separated in either one. You'll also notice that within the payment means, I don't have the bank transfer here. That's because the bank transfer, typically the money comes into the bank first, and the bank notifies you as you get the wire. So since the bank is already in the bank, and you're going in and entering the incoming payment, so you don't have it here. That question gets asked a lot during the training. So we're going to go to our bank, and we're going to say, let's go to the checking account, and you can see right now that has a balance of $80,000 overdrawn. And we're going to say we want to select everything from today. Right? We're going to go here, and we're going to add it. Okay, now I have one check left, so let's go back. You can see deposit number 14. Again, you can see what came in. If we look at the transaction amount, we can see the effect here. So we updated the bank by $22,000, and we put it in. The deposit program you see here is what affects the bank reconciliation program. So I advise clients when I train them is that you should put the date of the deposit. So if you're going to enter this afternoon, but you're not going to go to the bank until tomorrow, it's best to put the deposit date that way. It just makes it easier in your reconciliation program. In your reconciliation program, you're going to get a lump sum based on this deposit number 11. So again, it makes it easy within the bank rec program. We're not going to discuss the bank reconciliation program today. We'll do that in another session. I just want you to see where it's coming from. Okay? So now let's talk about outgoing payments. Okay? As we discussed, it's similar to the incoming payments. You can do outgoing payments to a specific vendor, which is what typically we do. You can also do an outgoing payment to a customer. Maybe you have a refund that you need to mail me, so you can do it that way. And you can do an outgoing to a specific GL accounts. The functionality works the same. There's a couple little features I'm going to show you. So let's call up, again, our vendor, Far East Imports. And we have the same principle here. We can give discount percentages, a total discount. We can select the amount we're going to pay. So if we want to do a partial pay and only pay $30,000 for this one and leave the balance, we can do that. Right? We can also do the on-account payments, same as we saw in the incoming payments. Let's just right-click, go to the payment means. And again, we can do it with cash, with a credit card. We can select our defined credit cards, or we can define a new one. We can also split the credit cards like we saw before, so we can put a little bit on each one. And we can also, in this case, we're going to do a check. Now you notice a little bit difference. The difference here is I have this manual check option, and the check number is grayed out. Just right-click, copy the balance due. By leaving it like this without checking the manual, that means that this check will be eligible for us to print. So we're going to print this later on. If we didn't want to print the check, let's say we hand wrote the check, or the check was already done in another way, but we need to get into the system, we can select manual, and then we have the option of putting our own check number in. This happens sometimes as I take a check and I went to the vendor and I decided to cut the check and handwrite it right there and I bring it back. So I don't want to print the check because it's already handwritten, but I need to actually specify the number. You can do that. We're going to turn it off. We're going to see it this way. Click OK, and let's add it. And again, if we look, we can see the same principle. We can see that the journal. It's a little bit different now. So you can see now we have a debit to the vendor, so we've affected the vendor's account, and in essence paid that invoice partially, and we've credited the money in the bank. Again, if we look here at the document, we can see the partial payment. So we still owe $24.75. Now, one thing I kind of tell people too, what happens when we're dealing with wire transfers and there's a fee involved, all right? Let me show you that. Let's say we go ahead and Far East is paying a bill. Let's pick this balance again, okay? But there was a wire transfer fee, all right? So there was a wire transfer fee, say, of $25, right? So I really didn't get $24.75. I got $24.50, all right, because I had to pay the bank $25. But I don't want to penalize the vendor for that because I have the entire amount. So I'm going to do the total payment of $24.75. I'm going to go to the payment means, and this can work also for the incoming payments too. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to bank transfer. Okay, I'm going to put my transfer date, and the amount I'm going to put the $24.50. That's what I'm going to actually affect the bank. Then I can go to my cash, and I can override this, and I can pick a an interest expense account. Well, I don't see what. Let's just pick an account here. See if I have one set up, but well, let's just we'll pick an account here. And I can go here and I can put the $25. Right, so now when I click OK, it's just telling me that this account is not a cash account, all right, because this is going to affect my cash flow report, but that's okay. It's just a warning. I'm really doing it because I'm putting this against my bank transfer fee. So again, I'm going to add it. We go back and we take a look. And again, we can see that the invoice is paid. It's now paid in full. Right? And what happens is the money, let's go to the GL. We can see here that we affected the vendor because it's paid. We put the $24.50 in the bank, and the $25 went to a bank fee or a type of fee. That's one of the ways you can do that when you actually have those outgoing payments. Now, you notice that the outgoing payments, I'm doing these and they're one at a time. This is nice if you're paying one vendor or two vendors, but typically what happens is people do a check run. They say, okay, today we need to make some payments. So we're going to probably pay about 30 vendors and we're going to pay them different invoices. By doing this, it's very tedious. I mean, I could select the vendor, select the ones I want to pay, right-click, do the payment means, and so on. But what I want to do is I want a more efficient way of creating these outgoing payments. I don't want to do one at a time. I want to do them all in a run. That's where the payment wizard comes involved. And you can see down here which is created by Payment Wizard. So let's go into that. Let's go to our Payment Wizard. And what this is going to do, allow me to select the range. So we're going to start a run. And again, we can load a saved payment run. We may have done one. I may have done one, but I didn't want to execute it until I got approval. So I don't want to have to void checks. So I would just wait. And I could load a saved run if I wanted to. I can also view runs that I've already executed if I want to redo one or do it again. Let's start with a new run. Again, the payment run can be used for both incoming and outgoing payments. It can be used for both checks and transfers. If I want, I can select both of these and do everything. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to do the outgoing checks for now. But if you notice when I select bank transfer, it asks me the file path, again, to create the electronic file, which I would send to the bank. Okay. You can add a minimum payment amount. So if you want, I put, say, $100. I won't select any invoices that are less than $100. I could put that if I wanted to. I'm going to click. And here I can select specific vendor codes. All right. You can also select by vendor groups. So let's say I have my vendor groups and I want to do different ones. Sometimes I have employees set up as vendors. I may have a vendor group for employees. I may have a vendor group for expense vendors or suppliers or so on if I want to select. But here I'm going to add everything. So you're seeing right now it's picking up all the vendors with the corresponding total amounts that the vendors owe. You also have these two vendors which have some euro and Canadian foreign exchange. The FC is the foreign currency. The LC is the local currency for the business partners. So if you look here, under the business partner, under this vendor, the currency, his default currency is euros. Okay. And you can see here that this vendor, we're using Canadian dollars. So you can see I'm going through a series of steps. I'm on step 3 of 8. So if I want, I could, let's say I'm just going to